I had decided to go, but he was hurt when he found out that I had betrayed him. He put my number on a porn site and spoke to a lot of people. I was a girl, and later they told a story where I was arrested. You were my ESTT. I talked to people about what would happen next. The next year, I was 22 years old. He was a cousin of mine who introduced me. He said I could go on the birthday. We went. When I separated, I decided to move on. Although he reported to everyone that I had betrayed him after he put my number on a porn site and spoke to a lot of people, I was a girl program. Later, they told a story where I was arrested. You were ESTT. I talked people what is the next year I was 22 years old. He was a cousin of mine who introduced me. So I can go on the birthday. We went to this birthday as friends, and so until then, I didn't know he was my cousin's cousin, right? We went to meet a person cool, and then I say it starts. Hence, the first reports the next day. He wanted to go to a club and I didn't want. I hung up my cell phone and he went to the door of the house to call me. I told him I don't want him because I already marked. I met him at a birthday party as friends. I didn't know him at first, but he turned out to be a really cool guy. We met up, and the next day, I said I wanted to go to a club, but he wanted to go to a different one. I told him I didn't want him because I was already with someone else. I was very against my will. He came with a really helpful man. He wanted to take me to places where I needed help with my child. I told him I was talking like this because I don't need help with my son. We went a little further forward. After we went to travel there, we stayed at a club. We kissed, and then he wanted to pick me up from college. I didn't want to be hasty, so I told him I didn't. I wanted to take my time. That's when I said I wanted to get to know him better. We went a little further forward after we went to travel there to meet people. I don't remember if we stayed at a club or not, but we kissed. Then, he wanted to pick me up from college, but I didn't want to go fast, so I told him, no, I'd rather not. Then, he introduced his daughter to his family. It was very fast, and I remember that it was on his birthday that I went. He called me, and I went to get me. I took my cousin with me. It was a staff that we knew. I even took a cake, and he asked me to date him. I'm talking about a 15-day deadline. We knew each other for less than a month, so it was a very short time. I said no, and I didn't know until he introduced his daughter to his family. It was really fast, and I remember that it was on his birthday that I went, that he called me, and that I went to get me. I took my cousin with me. It was a friend of the family. I even took a cake, and he asked me to date him. I'm talking about a 15-day deadline. We knew each other for less than a month, so it was a very short time. I said no and let it pass when he asked for the second time. When you're dating, you're not taking a guy on a date. I opened the beer can, sipped it, and said, "What is it for today?" I knew I didn't like him, but I spoke up and said no. But there was no worsening of the situation. After that, we were living together in 4 to 5 months. My son was 3 years old at that time, and his daughter was 7 or 8. When he asked me for the second time, I let it go. I was dating this guy, and I opened the beer can, took a sip, and said, "It's what I have for today, but I don't like you." I was a bit discouraged, but I didn't let it get to me. A few months later, we moved in together. My son was 3 years old at the time, and his daughter was 7 or 8. She had just turned 8. Because it was mid-November, she was just that age. She had 8 years, and my son had 3. Nicele was no longer with us. She was already gone. I was the third wife after her mother. I didn't know at the time, but I came to understand that I was a third wife after her mother. It was a long time ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 8 years, give or take. She was just 8 years old. It was in the middle of November. She passed away just a few years later, and my son was 3. Then, there was Nicele, who is no longer with us. She was the fruit of this marriage, and I was already the third wife after her mother. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was already a third wife after her mother. I didn't know when I came to know this was practically. It was at the end of my wedding. I only knew of the two, the mother and the second wife, who still warned me about a lot. Before she died, Her mother called to talk and said everything that he did for me. I really spoke. He is a narcissist and compulsive. He has to have control of everything and everyone. The situation got worse. He had so much control that he had cameras everywhere. Input, output, and even a camera in the... At the end of my wedding, I was aware of only one of the two. That was the mother, and the second was the second wife who still warned me about a lot. Before she died, her mother called to talk and said everything that he did for me. I really spoke. He is a narcissist. Compulsive is compulsive. He has to have control of everything and everyone. The situation got worse. He had so much control that he had a camera in the yard, and he had access to it if I left, if I came back, if I was going, if I was coming. He had self-control of everything. He had input and output of the account, and she started telling me that he did this to her when she said that he did to her and that he did to another ex. I said the problem is on me. I fell in love. I said I married the wrong person. The first outbreak was soon after we began living together, and we had been living together for 4 months. He had access to everything, and he was in control of the account. He told me that he did this to her, and he did the same to his ex. I said, I'm the one who made a mistake. I fell in love with the wrong person. We got married right away and lived together for 4 months. That's when the first aggression happened, and we went to the police station. After that, it was just a situation, and he acted like nothing had happened. Later, he acted like everything was normal. I couldn't say for sure, but it was normal. He said he had a jealous outburst because he felt betrayed by his ex. I told him that the outburst would happen less and less. Then, he went to his mother's arms and cried. This is when things first got aggressive. We went to the police station, and then it was just a situation. He acted like nothing had happened. Later on, he acted as if it had been normal. I can't say for sure, but it was normal. He said he had a jealous outburst because he felt betrayed. He said he wouldn't have it happen again. Then he went and cried with my mother. At least that's what he made it seem like to his family. They thought they were already used to it and didn't get involved. Then we got more involved. A woman is good. Then it happened. We came back, and then it was when I found out Livia was pregnant. During her pregnancy, he said a lot that he was getting old. He wanted a son. He was crazy to be he was so excited to be a dad, and he really wanted a son. He said he didn't know what a present father was, but he wanted to be one. He said he would be our father forever. He created this need when we talked about it today, and I understand why things happened the way they did. His first wife really loved to travel and leave, and he prohibited that. So, he had this control over her. He took the second wife completely to travel and do things with her. My father was a kind man, but he had a hard time accepting that I was a father. He thought that we would be together forever. I understand why he felt that way, and I'm glad we can talk about it. My first wife loved to travel, but he didn't want her to have a son. When she left, he passed on this need to me. He wanted a son with me to share this experience. I was always hitting the key a lot to drive the car and study. I was forbidden to drive, but his current wife was allowed to drive. He thought the wedding was over. She was crazy to be a mother, and he didn't want to give a son to her. Then she left, and this need for a son passed to me. So, he had this need to have a son with me. To you, it's a new situation. I always hit the key a lot for driving school, and getting the car. I was forbidden from driving by his current wife, who has the permission to drive. So, he thinks the wedding was over there. He supplies the next one, and then the next wife, and then consequently, it causes a totally new disorder. They like me because I don't make all the value. All had a problem, and all had a problem. The problem was never him. He was always a man. Well, it didn't change this day for night. It was like this. I will discern you right. Monday to Friday, he was a man worker, actually. In the beginning, not in the start. He was really my wonder. He was always so reliable, always ready to lend a hand with the little things around the house. I was always very fond of him. He was so kind, so comforting. He had this habit of telling me if I had already taken 3 beers, even if I had only bought 2. Then came the finance. That's where I speak. I received my son's pension, Miguel's pension. I had to put it in his account. I worked with him, and he did. Everything was indoors, and everything was cute. I really liked the beer, and then he made me comfortable. Then he took over the beer, and he started to tell me that even if I purchased it, he had a habit of telling me that I had already taken 3 hours, so he had this habit of telling. Then came the finance, which is where I speak. I received my son's pension. Miguel's pension had to go to his account, and then I had worked with him for him, and he did. He didn't see the money for basic things for me to go buy a basic money absorbent. He spoke is not for the house. Everything people are winning is home, not. But I need to do no. Now you will have to wait. And then this was controlling the little thing to another thing that it is greater. I was always very family-oriented. Family has always been a lot of fun. So, always when I always hit the key a lot because your family makes barbecue, because I didn't have much money, so I didn't go out to buy things. I didn't have money for basic necessities, like toilet paper. He spoke to people, but not to me. He was not interested in the house, but in the people. People were winning things, not the house. But I was not able to do that. I had to wait. It was a different thing, but it was greater. My family was always very important to me. Family has always been a big deal. When I met people, I always hit the ground running. The street staff talked to me, but I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't invite anyone because my brothers were jealous of the neighbors. They were jealous of him. Then, when he was having these arguments, I said, "Wow, nobody likes him." It was pity. Then, the bond of his friendship was my family bond. It was mine. He went to my bond. Then, when he managed to access all this bond, he started to take me too. Wow, but so that I go out to the party. The street staff told me not to talk to anyone, and I didn't. I didn't invite anyone because my brothers were jealous of him. The neighbors were jealous of him too. When he was having these arguments, I said, "Wow, nobody likes him." It was pity. Then the bond of his friendship was my family bond. It was mine. He went to my bond. Then, when he managed to access all this bond, he started to take me, too. Wow, but so that I go out to the party with your friends? As much as I could. At Andorinha, that is the supermarket, we could eat with girls, and from there he went to me and searched me. So I didn't. I had more freedom with you, but you go to what you were going to do with your friends, so I no longer had more freedom. Then he started, you go to your family, but your family keeps you in a rut because you're family. I don't know why. He started to blame my family, and I started to stop seeing my friends because I thought it was bad and he didn't like it. I lost the connection I had with my friends, and I realized I was losing myself. He didn't show who he was from water of the night to the day, gradually taking and shooting and blaming. He started to blame my family, and I started to stop going with my friends because I thought it was bad. I wasn't going with my friends anymore, and I felt like I was losing myself. I saw that he was taking over, and he was showing who he was from water of the night to the day. He was taking and shooting, and he was blaming. While he didn't see, he wasn't satisfied. He disabled me so much that I had fear of not realizing it and not being able to take care of my children, feed my children, or do something for myself. This fear he put in me crushed me, so I was afraid of losing myself. As far as I can say, there's this break until I have this conversation with his daughter's mother. When I had this conversation with her 2 months later, he didn't see defining, and that made him feel unsatisfied. He made me so scared of not realizing it and not being able to take care of my children, feed my children, or do something for them that I was afraid of losing it. I was so scared that I couldn't say anything. I didn't say anything to anyone for 2 months. Then, when I finally spoke with his daughter's mother, she committed suicide. I'll always remember the way he looked at me when he said he didn't want to live anymore. He said it was over, and then we went to her house. There was so much. When I started reading her diary, I said, "People, this guy is crazy. He is crazy." The things she wrote are absurd, and that I was actually paralyzed. I remember my mother sent a message, a text, and I'll always remember the way she looked at me, as if she was trying to tell me something. I told her that I understood, and then she said she was finished. We went to her house, and when I started reading her diary, I was shocked by what I saw. I thought, this guy is crazy. The things she wrote were absurd, and it actually made me feel paralyzed. I remember my mother sent me a message, a text, and my mother spoke so I could have my strength. Mother talked a lot with me about things and me. People spoke, but how could I do this? I said no, I was getting crazy, and I started to stay away from that. Only he spoke, so not now. You have to help take care of my daughter. She has to do for my daughter. I said, not everything is okay. There is no mother. I said like this, but now, and I will do what I can with my life with 3 young children, 24 years old. I said, I don't believe there is no such thing. Then, as I passed by, I remembered some things that I had forbidden. I got very firm, and he started getting more and more nervous. Sometimes at dawn, I woke up and found myself touching my intimate parts. I complained, and he said, no, you're my wife. You have to let me do this with another woman on the street. Then, that thought kind. I said, I don't think I'm able to do that. Then, as I was passing by, I realized that I had already forbidden some things. I was very firm, and he started getting more and more nervous. Sometimes at dawn, I woke up and touched my intimate parts, and I complained, so he said, no, you're my wife. You have to let me do this with another woman on the street. That thought was absurd, but in his eyes, I was his wife. I had to let him have as many times as he wanted. I woke up at night, he was having relationships, and I had to leave and finish. I raised my children, sanitized myself, and lied. I slept only that was in my head. Why is he doing this? He said, no, you're my wife. I like your pleasure for you. You are my wife. And he was doing this so he could be with another woman. Besides, I had made my head because you get so manipulated. It's hard to believe, but in his eyes, I was nothing more than a means to an end. I had to let him have his way with me, even though it meant waking up at night. I had to leave and finish. I raised him, and I was the only one who took care of him. I was the one who made sure he was clean and well-rested. I was the one who was in his head, telling him he was mine, that I liked his pleasure, and that I was his woman. He was doing this to manipulate me. But it's so hard when I say that. There's so much involved in what you have, and you create the need to please until the day that I said, I will kill you. My divorce was for a year. I was an alcoholic, and it was cold. In that part, I said I needed to get out, and then I started. It was a heavier situation, so I was prohibited from taking medicine. I was forbidden to take medicine when I went to. It's really hard when you're in that situation. I was drinking a lot, and I started to feel like I couldn't live without alcohol. I felt like I was in a rut, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I felt like I couldn't live with myself. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a dark place, and I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place, and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in a really bad place and I couldn't see a way out. I was in a lot of pain and he didn't leave. And in that time, he was talking to me about what I had to do to get out of the situation. I got pregnant 3 times and I had abortions all 3 times. The last one was the last straw. I told him, this is it. It's over. I'm leaving. I started thinking about how I couldn't stay with that guy. I prayed to God, saying, Lord, if I can't get out of here, I'll kill my 2 children. I'll kill myself because I had no life. I was not happy. You looked at me, and I started drinking a lot because I had a hard time leaving, and I told him that I couldn't stay with him. I said, if I can't get out of here, I'll kill myself and my 2 children. I was so unhappy, and I had no life. I was not happy. I started drinking a lot because I had a discount, but then I cut back on how much I drank. I didn't want to go back home. When he stopped, he realized that I no longer wanted to listen to him. He started getting physically and verbally aggressive, and then he started manipulating me. That's when I started living a hellish existence. It was a very difficult time in my life. I was on that discount, and I cut back on the amount of drinking I wanted to do at home. I didn't want to go back there. When he stopped, he realized that I wasn't listening to him anymore. Then, he started getting physical and verbal, and he started manipulating me. That's when I started living a hellish existence for a year. It was the worst year of my life. He used the tactic of having a child to manipulate me. He said, you have a child, and it's not your fault. It happened more, and I was upset, but I didn't want to. He said, no, you have that. You don't want to do it with a child. I said, no, but there are no conditions. He went to the remedy. He said, you go. I remember that he used the tactic, saying that if I had a small child, it would be my fault. I told him that wasn't true, and it wouldn't happen again. But he insisted, saying that I didn't want it and that I didn't have the option. I told him no, but he insisted, saying that there were conditions. He said I could take the pill that day, and I agreed, even though I was reluctant. He put the pill in his mouth and became erect. He stayed there, and I cried so much. But that day, the children were at home, and there were 3 of them. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I said I didn't want to, but he insisted. He said, you go, and then he started talking to me like I was a child. He said I was just a fetus, that I was nothing yet. I was just a ball of blood, nothing. He put the pill in his mouth and stayed there. He didn't get up for anything. I cried so much that day, but I don't remember the children being home. There were 3 of them. I don't remember in detail, but I remember that when it happened, he asked for forgiveness. He cried when I was having a hemorrhage inside the car. I asked him to stop so I could go to the bathroom to change. I warned him when I came back. This time I said, now he will improve. But he got worse. Then, the 3rd was from me. I was abused practically. I have such vivid memories of the events that transpired. When I was heading to Mina's, my son was with me, and he was in distress. I had to stop frequently to use the bathroom, and I asked him to do the same. When I returned, I told him that he was doing better, but he was still struggling. Then, there was a 3rd incident. I was in an abusive relationship, and it was very difficult. After that, I had a 3rd abortion. I told him that I didn't want it anymore, and he was very supportive. The first month was the best. I was determined to not have any more children. I didn't want to have any more children, and I was very clear about that. I said that I would raise money to do so, even though I was leaving. I was mistreated during the relationship, and then when I had the 3rd abortion, I was in a lot of pain. I told him I didn't want it anymore, and he was the best man again the first month. I was already in a state of mind where I didn't want to do it anymore. I said I didn't want to, and I'm going to raise money to do it. I'm leaving here, and we had one fight. It was a very ugly fight, and the aggression was among the children. My son hit me. I said he would be a Tapo and his daughter. Then there was that Alge. I spoke. I got everything. I left, and I caught everything. I didn't open a sheet on the floor. My mother went to pick me up. I got it stuck in the car when I came back the next day to get mine. He went up, and his eyes were filled with tears. This was a tough fight, and the kids were really aggressive. My son got hit, and I told him he'd be a tapa in his daughter's life. Then, Alj arrived, and I got everything. I left everything, and I didn't open a single sheet on the floor. My mother went to pick me up, and I got stuck in the car. When I came back the next day to get mine, he was crying. They're certain of what you're doing, and he acts with my father, with everyone, as if nothing had happened. Again, as if nothing had happened. He's smiling, playing, as if nothing had happened. And another thing that's very important, the way they talk like this does. You work to build an empire because, in this case, all women worked for him to have good things. Then, as he won a car, he put a woman in madness, told lies until she got. They're so sure of what you're doing, and he acts like nothing happened with my father and everyone there, as if nothing had happened. He's acting like nothing happened, smiling, playing, as if nothing had happened. And another thing that's very important, the way they talk about you, like you're not working to build an empire because in this case, and all women worked for him to have something for him, to have something. Then, as he won a car, he put a woman in a state of madness, told lies until she got what he wanted. He won another object, won something else that makes you work to help him pay those bills, those things because he puts in his mind, this is ours. Then they look at you and say you have no right to anything. You came here with clothes on your body and you're leaving. He did it. He did this. I went to his fifth wife, and I went through the same situation, so I went, although when I claimed the home, over the car, about things you're not entitled to anything, you know that. He won another object, and then something else that required effort to pay for. He wanted to help, so he offered to pay those bills, those things, because he thought it was his responsibility. But then people started saying, you have no right to anything. You came here with nothing, and you left with everything. I went to his fifth wife, and I saw that she was going through the same situation. So I went, although when I claimed the home, over the car, about things you were not entitled to anything. You know that, right? But who is leaving? I'm me with your daughter. You can't create it for me. These were his words. I left. I made the first location of my house. My daughter was very sick, and I started right then, conforming to me to call. He can solve some of the Livia. He spoke to everyone. I was wanting to go back. I never spoke, but every time I came from work, or that was happening, he was waiting for me once. He entered the house, and I thought to myself, what if that boy from the soap opera was there? He looked at me and said, who let you come in? That was the start of a difficult period. I felt persecuted, and then I spoke up. I needed to deal with the pain of my wedding, and then I went back to where I started. I went after therapy, I went after help, I went to get help for myself to be able to. He entered the indoor world, and I started to play with this episode that featured that boy from the soap opera racket. It looked the same. He said, hey, I need to talk to you. I replied, who let you come in? That was the start of a period of persecution. Then came the post. I went through the period of mourning for my wedding, and then I started again. I went after therapy. I went after help. I want to get help so that I wouldn't put another person in my life in that exact moment. It cost me dearly to be married the wrong way. It cost me a lot financially and psychologically. It also affected my children's mental health. I don't speak much about my story because when I say this, I'm grateful. I'm not strong. I learned to get through it. I'm grateful to have learned so much from this experience. I've learned that fear only pushes us further from our goals. I'm so happy to have been able to pay the rent and make a purchase in the first month. I was able to take care of my children, and I felt like I could get what I wanted. At first, he started waking up, and then the little persecution began. He was strong, but I learned that fear only pushed me to reach for the things I wanted in life. I had longed for these goals, and I achieved them when I saw that the first month, I had managed to pay the rent and make the purchase of the month, and I had taken care of my children. I said, now I can get what I want, and I went for it. At the beginning, he started to wake up, and the little persecution began. He manipulated me from the outside, as far as he could, and he got someone who was the opposite of what I wanted to go back with him. I told the guys, this guy is crazy. It's not possible. Then, in fights and reluctantly, I didn't go to court to get anything by right. I have it. I know I have it. I won't go after it because everything here in life we do, the people pay. My prayer was for the next one, so that God he started to manipulate me, and I felt like I was losing sight of what was important. I wanted to reconcile with him, but I was afraid of the consequences. I didn't go to court because I didn't want to fight, but I'm ready to forgive him. I want to move on and leave the past behind. I'm asking for forgiveness, not just for myself, but for all the people he hurt. This is a crime, and it's important to understand that. When you're in a situation like this, it's hard to see the way out, but I'm here to support you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to forgive. I had to let go of the anger and resentment I felt towards him, recognizing that it was not healthy for me or my family. I asked for forgiveness, not just for myself, but for all the victims of his actions. It's important to recognize that these crimes are not easily forgotten and can have long-lasting effects. When you're in a situation like this, it's crucial to find a way to move forward and heal. For some women, it can be challenging to see the manipulation and abuse that's happening, but it's important to recognize the signs and be aware of the situation. The narcissist might try to rush you into a relationship, using their manipulation to control you and make you feel dependent on them. It's essential to be aware of these tactics and to protect yourself. I'm so grateful for Ariane's support during that tough time in October. She was there for me and my kids, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm doing much better now, and I'm happy to say that I've found a new rhythm with my children. They're happy and healthy, and I owe it all to my wonderful father, Miguel. I'm so grateful to have had the support of my family and friends throughout this journey. They've been there for me, and I'm so thankful for their love and encouragement. I'm so grateful to God for being there for my son. The woman was also there, and it was wonderful. I had a base of both sides, including the family. My daughter's father's family members are still there for me. I don't say this to my advantage, but they like Ariane, who was there all the time for both him and the family and for me. I left this relationship because I felt like I was drowning and no one looked back. I had to leave alone. I got it then. When people get this, you can inspire other women. You too get this is very important. My mother had already warned a few days before. She said, "You have family," so I had my mother, my brothers, my uncles, and my whole family there. All my godfathers were there. I had no family, so I had friends of ours go and give me. I looked back, but no one looked at me. I had to leave alone, and I understood what was going on. When people go through this, they can inspire other women. You too can get through it. My mother had already warned me a few days before. She said, "You have family," so I had my mother, my brothers, my uncles, and my whole family there. All my godfathers were there. I had family, so they went seeking friends of ours and went to give me a glass of water. The neighbors of his street, they assembled all my trousseau. A blanket, walking did everything, because just as they already knew the history, they did everything to see if there was a stable. And after that, still because I came. I think the absence comes later. You sit at the beginning, there is an absence. Of a male figure within the house. Then comes this absence, then in this absence. So I started to stay a little depressed, and then I said no. I decided to take a break from drinking alcohol and sought help. I went to therapy, and I remember being exhausted. I told myself I could handle it, and I remember going to a psychologist. I didn't speak during the first session, and I remember crying from the beginning to the end. I had a drink, and I was able to get some help. I went to therapy, and I'm so grateful that I did. I was exhausted when I went after therapy, but I spoke like this: I'll be able to handle all this. I remember going to a psychoanalyst and a psychologist, and she came. I still remember the first session. I didn't speak at all when she said, "What is your name?" I cried from the beginning to the end. I cried in the second session, and in the third, I managed to say some things. It was already better on Thursday, and we made progress in the 10th session. She turned off the notebook and cried. She said, "You can go because you are well, and I want to get help because there are things that we can't do alone." I felt so much better after I cried in the third meeting. On Wednesday, I was able to share some things. By Thursday, we had made some progress in the 10th session. She turned off the notebook and cried. She said she was feeling better and that she was ready to get help. I decided to get help because there are things we can't do alone. I think this is true for many women. In this case, he should have more public health resources because many women need help but don't have the money to pay for it. I still had a hard time, but I decided to get help because, besides the family support, the psychological treatments are also very helpful. It's like being welcomed by 1,000 people when you're alone. I think this is something many women can relate to. In this case, he should have received more support from public health because there are so many women who need help but don't have the financial resources to pay for it. I was in a similar situation. I sought help from a wonderful person who provided me with a package of support. However, I also sought treatment because, in addition to the emotional support from family, the psychological treatments are also necessary. It's like being at a party with one person, feeling isolated and alone. This can lead to depression because you feel so lonely. I decided to address my traumas and sought treatment. After that, I felt ready to take charge of my life. But first, I needed someone to help me and to listen to my cries for relief. I'm so grateful for the people in my life who have helped me through some really tough times. They've made all the difference in the world, especially when I needed it most. I'm doing really well right now, and I'm so happy. I've learned to do everything on my own, and I'm happy. I can have a drink without feeling lonely, and I'm happy to have my children. I've learned to work on my own, take care of my house, and manage my money. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm doing really well, and I'm grateful for that. I've learned to be independent, and I'm happy with that. I've learned to be happy on my own, and I'm grateful for that. I've learned to be content with what I have, and I'm happy with that. I've learned to be content with myself, and I'm grateful for that. I've learned to be content with my own company, and I'm happy about that. I love being alone, and I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I take my books with me to read, and I love doing that. It was the best thing I ever did. My life changed after the wedding. I sought help and learned to leave the past behind. My friend once said, "You're fat and ugly, you have 2 kids, one of each father, and nobody will want you." But when I found someone who loved me, I felt like I could be my true self. But sometimes, when you find someone, you might feel like you're in the wrong hands. But I'm very happy now.